Can you hear my smile? If you're listening on the radio, you can hear my smile. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see my smile. President-elect Donald Trump hit a grand slam home run yesterday. Let me walk you through it. Single, Sergio Gore for presidential personnel. Now, that's an obscure office in the White House, but it's the gateway to every job in the executive branch. And Sergio, been around for a while. I don't know him very well. I think I've met him once. He worked for Rand Paul for a while. He's a smart, savvy insider. My old boss at OPM, before she left and I became acting director of OPM, was Constance Horner. She was PPO for George H.W. Bush. Before that, Bob Tuttle was the PPO who hired me into the Reagan White House and the Department of Justice. And it's an important job. Not many people know about it, but it's an important job. Sergio is young, and he's fast, and he's smart. The double is Doug Collins for the Secretary of the Veterans Administration, because Doug's a great Navy veteran, very smart. I sat down with him once when he was the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee and walked away saying, wow, that guy is smart. He ran for and did not win the Senate. He's a chaplain, a man of God. He's a great, great person. He has a heart for veterans. That's great. The triple is Todd Blanche. Now, I'm going to play for you this hour an encore of my interview with Todd Blanche, veteran of the Southern District of New York, friend of Andrew McCarthy, and he is the lawyer for President Trump in the proceedings in New York and Florida. He hit the home run in Florida, case dismissed. He's going to win in New York. He is a bulldog. He is smart as the day is long. He'll be the number 2 at the Department of Justice, and he will bring the flamethrower to melt the resistance out of the wall. He is a smart lawyer, and he knows everybody, and he knows everything. Everyone at the Southern District knows it. But what I'm really happiest about, absolutely over the moon, Doug Burgum is going to be the Secretary of the Interior. Now, I don't know Doug well. I know him well enough. And I've had a long meal with him. I've talked with him. I communicate with him. I didn't know this was happening. He kept it very discreet. I was praying. I wanted him for state or interior. Interior is the beast of the federal agency. It has 70,000 of the non-defense federal agency, has 70,000 employees. Let me run down for you what the Department of the Interior runs. One of the original departments. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Indian Education, the Bureau of Land Management, that's a nightmare, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, the Bureau of Trust Fund Administration, the National Park Service, the Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the U.S. Geological Service. Now, I spent 27 years arm wrestling the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Army Corps of Engineers. Always U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Everything the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does hurts you, and it doesn't help species. Literally everything. They do not know what they're doing. They really don't. They're nice people. They have no idea. A bunch of biologists running around making up theories about habitat, threatened habitat, unoccupied habitat, critical habitat. Can be done in one day with AI. Doug Burgum is a Silicon Valley genius, the governor of North Dakota. He would have been a great vice presidential selection. He is smart. There are 70,000 people at the Department of the Interior. 70,000. There's a best and there's a worst. And most of the worst are at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I kid you not. It is the worst run agency in the federal government as far as I know personally, because they seize people's property by declaring it might be part of an endangered species habitat. I offer you the Delhi Sands flower-loving fly, which I litigated over for years, argued over for years. The Delhi Sands flower-loving fly lives out in San Bernardino, California. There aren't many of them left because there's not enough habitat for it to live on. It was developed before they found it. It comes out of the ground once a year for about 3 days. And if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service thinks that it's anywhere near your land, they won't let you use your land. Private land, not public land, private land. And they don't think it's a taking. Or a vernal pool fairy shrimp, or Riverside fairy shrimp, or a Santa Barbara fairy shrimp. They don't show up for years. They live in vernal pools. Vernal pools in California don't fill up very often. Then you can't distinguish between the ones which are common and the one which are endangered. It's all made up. California gnatcatcher isn't endangered. Anyway, I know this agency. I know the EPA Region 9 that deals with them. Every time you want to develop a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service piece of land or a piece of land over which the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service claims jurisdiction, you get sued by the crazy environmentalists. And then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service settles with them about your land and you can't build it. I had clients, the Morgers, they both died. They both died. They put everything they could into a bunch of land in Riverside County and they died waiting for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to declare whether or not it could be built on. It is a nightmare. It is a nightmare. The Bureau of Indian Affairs does not work very well. Bureau of Land Management should be offloading all sorts of land for people to build houses on. We have a housing shortage in the United States. We have homeless veterans. Bureau of Land Management can fix that tomorrow. Took me forever to get the City of North Las Vegas and the Bureau of Land Management to transfer some Bureau of Land Management land to the City of North Las Vegas so my client, a private developer, could come in and build houses for the City of North Las Vegas. I don't want a job. I'm retired from that stuff. No, I've got white hair. I had brown hair when I started dealing with the Department of the Interior. They have independent litigating authority. The solicitor of the Department of Interior can go to court. And the Center for Biological Diversity, the worst of them all, be on notice. Doug Burgum is not for messing around. And by the way, he'll do right by the land. He's a steward of the land. He has been the governor of North Dakota for a long time. He's a steward of the land. He does not put up with nonsense. He is smart. And when I say smart, he mortgaged his family farm, took all the proceeds, went to Silicon Valley, developed prototype 1 for some software, got eaten alive by Microsoft, said, oh, that's not going to work. Developed prototype number 2, made $1 billion. He's worth $1 billion. And then he sold it everywhere. He went over to China on a trip, and it was being copied over there. So he's very aware of intellectual property, very aware. He's just so smart. Not a lawyer. That's a plus. He'll pick good people. He'll put them in place. They will have we will have my private dream. He knows energy. I was afraid he would end up at energy. It's a great department, but it has a limited portfolio. It's in charge of our research labs at Los Al and the other ones. And it's a good job, but I didn't want Doug Burgum to be pigeonholed at energy. He can get with the Secretary of Energy and say, we got all this land on the Bureau of Land Management. Let's put a small nuclear reactor, a small modular reactor on each of them and power America's future. Work hand in glove. He'll take care of the Park Service, by the way. A lot of people say the best job in the country is the National Park Service. My friend Ron ran it for a while. Nixon called him up at the end of Nixon's administration. Said, what do you want, Ron? Ron had advanced the trip to China. Said, I want the Park Service. And Nixon gave it to him. It's a great job, because who doesn't like Yosemite and Yellowstone? Who doesn't like any national park? Smoky Mountain, you name it. People love them. So that's the good side. Our Native American friends deserve better than they have ever gotten from the federal government, but Doug Burgum can deliver that. He can manage all this. I bet you the U.S. Geological Survey actually doesn't need much managing. It probably is just fine. I think Commerce has the National Maritime Fisheries. When Elon and Vivek get to going, send more to DOI, Interior, and let Burgum run it. So I'm just here to say, grand slam, Mr. President-elect. Grand slam. Sergio, Doug, Todd, and Doug. Best day of the transition to date, and we've had good ones. A great one when Marco Rubio went to state, Mike Waltz went to the White House, and Susie Wiles went to the White House. And the ones that you're upset about, the Senate will do its job. They will figure out who can do what, and they will not let people through, and they'll be withdrawn. Marco Rubio, great. Tom Homan, great border czar. Listened to Ruthless yesterday. Cannot wait to hear Getting Hammered today. Had lunch yesterday with Vic Mattis, co-host with Mary Catherine Ham. Vic is one of the smartest guys in town, Mary Catherine. If you don't listen to Getting Hammered, I'm here to tell you, Getting Hammered is the best podcast for husbands and wives to listen to together as they go anywhere. But I listen to Getting Hammered, Ruthless Podcast, Dwayne's World, of course. I don't listen to Highly Concentrated Hugh, my own podcast. I listen to the editors. I listen to Dan Senor, Call Me Back, and I listen to commentary. If you do those 7, you'll be smart. You'll be very, very smart. Watch Fox News if you want some pictures and breaking news, and then listen to 7 podcasts and me, and you'll be smart. And I'm here to tell you, President-elect Trump hit a grand slam home run. One of them, Todd Blanche, to be Deputy Attorney General, he was my guest this summer, talking about Mershon and the circus clowns show up in Manhattan. I'm going to reprise that, replay it for you so you can hear Todd Blanche talk about Donald Trump and why he's going to be such a great Deputy Attorney General. Again, I don't want a job. I'm retired, friends. I want nothing. I just want to applaud Donald Trump, Sergio Gore, Doug Collins, and especially Doug Burgum. What a great overnight. What wonderful stuff to wake up to. Todd Blanche. This is 27 minutes long. I sat down and talked with him this summer when he was defending Donald Trump before Juan Mershon, and the disposition of his motion is not yet heard. Let's listen to not then just private attorney Blanche, now Deputy Attorney General Designate Blanche. Mr. Blanche joins us from New York, or he might be back in Florida at the offices of the Blanche Law Firm, BlancheLaw.com. Good morning, Mr. Blanche. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning. It's great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning.
I want to begin immediately with the motions pending before Judge Mershon, the trial judge in Manhattan. They call them justices in New York, but I use judge for the benefit of the audience that isn't aware of the weird titles up there. You're a former U.S. Assistant United States Attorney in the Southern District of New York. I believe you are the lead counsel for President Trump in Manhattan and in other proceedings. Can you tell us when you expect Judge Mershon to rule on the motion that you made 54 pages just days ago that Trump versus the United States ought to render the proceedings a nullity in Manhattan?
That's right. I do represent President Trump as lead counsel in the Manhattan case and also the Florida case, which is a little bit more enjoyable to talk about this morning, and hopefully we will. But you're right. We put a motion in. Look, the Supreme Court unequivocally said that a president, not just President Trump, but any president, is entitled to significant immunity when it comes to his job. And we had briefed that before the trial started in front of the judge, Judge Mershon, and he gave it, I don't know the legal term, but back of the hand is what he gave it before the trial started. And it turns out that we were right, and there was some key testimony that was offered by the people, which is what the government's referred to in New York, by the people at trial, that is absolutely immune and should never have been said to anybody, much less a jury in Manhattan, in communications that the president had with his advisors while he was president. Documents that were used during his presidency were offered against him at trial. And so this conviction, in our view, should have never happened in the first place, but just under the Supreme Court's decision, it should be dismissed, in our view, immediately.
More coming up of Todd Blanche, nominated by Donald Trump, the president-elect, to be the Deputy Attorney General, the number 2 at Justice. I am thrilled. A smart guy from the Southern District of New York. That is just great, celebrating Doug Burgum at Interior. But I want you to hear, and others, Doug Collins at VA, Sergio Gore at PPO, that's great. But I'm focused on Todd Blanche, President Trump's nominee to be the Deputy Attorney General. Mr. Blanche is Donald Trump's lawyer in New York against Mershon and Alvin Bragg, and in Florida, where he's already won the case. He joined me in June. I'm replaying that interview so you get a sense of the great lawyer he is sent to be number 2 at Department of Justice. Let's pick up where we left off. Now, Mr. Blanche, the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Roberts was very explicit about the fact that evidence of advisors to the president cannot enter into proceedings against him. What specifically are you referring to? Is it Margot's? What is it that you're talking about that got into the trial record that the jurors heard that they ought never to have heard?
A lot of evidence. Let's just hit a couple of the key pieces. Hope Hicks was the communications director for President Trump. She testified about a key conversation she had with President Trump in the White House regarding the Michael Cohen scandal at the time. And the significance of that conversation was she said that President Trump had implied to her that he in fact knew about the payment before the election. Now, we contested that, and we still do contest that. The only other witness who said that President Trump knew about that payment before the election was Michael Cohen himself. And so during summation, the prosecutor described Hope Hicks' testimony as devastating, okay, because it corroborated Michael Cohen. That communication under the current Supreme Court precedent as of 2 weeks ago, it should never have been allowed in. There was also a government ethics form that President Trump was required to complete, and there was a footnote in that ethics form that described the repayment to Michael Cohen. That document was used, admitted into evidence. It was used at trial as an admission by President Trump. And the prosecution, again, argued strenuously in their summation about how key that was. That's something that should have never been allowed into evidence. There was, we can go on and on. There's testimony from President Trump's really like his secretary, Madeleine Westerhout. She's a really amazing woman, and she testified about really important details of the life of President Trump while president. That's not supposed to be allowed. And
oh my goodness, that's dispositive. You can stop right now, Mr. Blanche, because Hope Hicks, for the benefit of the audience, with Donald Trump before he became president, throughout much of the White House, she took a period of time off and then she returned. She's the only person I remember that came back to the White House. And so she's still with the president's team in some respect. Madeleine was there until a member of the Washington Post leaked a private conversation, got her fired. And she's still a friend of mine. Yeah. Went to high school with my son, in fact. But that's dispositive. So there's evidence in the record before the jury, argued by the prosecutor in the summation that you can't even answer, that the jury heard, that the Chief Justice ruled without any qualification. They can't use that evidence. So you've got a slam dunk winner.
That's right. And look, the other part, just to not to dwell on this all morning, but there were tweets admitted into evidence from when President Trump was president about Mr. Cohen and about others. And before the trial, we said, you can't let these in. These are immunized. This is the president should enjoy immunity. And the Judge Merchan, just said, absolutely not. You're never going to convince me that that's the sort of thing that can't come in. Chief Justice Roberts said unequivocally that most communications, including tweets from the president, should be immune and should never be used at trial. So we have a good motion. So we'll see.
That's very interesting to me, because I saw that when Judge Merchan made his ruling that sentencing would be postponed until September 18th, he also wrote that he will be ruling on motions and that sentencing if it is still necessary. So he's clearly open to dismissing the entire proceeding. Yesterday, Andy McCarthy, who I'm sure you know from United States Attorney alumni circles, said on this program that the Erlinger decision also ought to force Judge Merchan to dismiss the case, because Erlinger reaffirmed a unanimity in every element of a conviction, and obviously the judge's instructions allowed for non-unanimity in the second crime theory. Do you agree with Andy on that?
I do. Andy and I had the same job. We were both chiefs in the White Plains Division at the Southern District of New York, and I think Andy's a genius, and I respect his views, and I very much agree with him. Not only was there not a unanimous requirement for a key part of this case, but if to those that followed the trial, that part of the case was really 90% of the evidence. So they spent 2 full weeks talking about this supposed conspiracy, misdemeanor conspiracy under New York state law to influence an election. And at the end of the day, the jury didn't have to agree on what was improper or illegal about that effort. And we'll never know whether they did agree, whether they had, 4 or 5 different views about which crime was the other crime. And so the Supreme Court, again, has for decades been warning prosecutors, Appointee and other cases, that you cannot take away somebody's liberty if you're not going to make the jury find everything completely unanimous. So we're cautiously optimistic that this case is going to be thrown out. It should have never been brought, and we're fighting every day, and we'll see what happens in September.
Do you expect the judge to rule quickly? Given the assassination attempt on President Trump and the situation in the country, it would be incumbent, if I were the Judge, to move quickly on your motions. Your motions seem to me to be obviously going to be granted. Do you expect him to move quickly in light of recent events?
I hope so. Look, the people's brief is due in a week or so, 2 weeks, and he's given himself the judge gave himself a September 6th date of when he'll announce a decision, but he's not wed to that. He can announce it whenever he wants. The Saturday was just a very sad day for this country, and it's in part a reflection of the lawfare, in my view, that's been happening against President Trump, including the DA in the Manhattan case. And I hope that Judge Merchan does it. I really do. It would go a long way, in my view, to healing some of the wounds that we have. And look, I've spent the past year being disappointed, so I don't want to get too excited. But I really hope Judge Merchan agrees with our motion and throws this case out.
Jed Rubenfeld is a Yale law professor who's been a guest of mine. He urges that a USC 1983 action, 42 USC 1983, be filed before sentencing should sentencing be scheduled again because of the irreparable injury that will occur to your client and, I believe, to the United States should sentencing occur. Has that crossed your mind? Is that out there? Does Professor Rubenfeld have a good argument in your view?
With him on several occasions and communicated with him during the trial, and there is nothing that's not on the table for us if there's going to be a sentencing. 1983 actions based on this type of conduct and facts, it's a very steep hill, and I don't know that it's something that we feel like is guaranteed success, but we're not looking for guaranteed successes. We're looking for any opportunity to stop this. So there's nothing not on the table. And I think what we would have to do in that case is walk across the street to the Southern District of New York and file an action if that's what it comes to. We'll cross that bridge if we get to it. There's procedures within New York that we can work within as well before sentencing, and so everything's on the table, and we have a lot of really smart folks around President Trump that are giving advice and counsel and to us and to the team, and we're taking it all, and obviously we'll see what happens.
My friend and old colleague from the Department of Justice, I was there in the Reagan years. Mark Levin was there in the Reagan years. I worked for Smith and Meese. He worked for Ed Meese. And then I went to the White House counsel's office. We have disagreements, but we get along very well. Mark wants to use extraordinary writs to the Supreme Court. I don't think that'll work. Jed Rubenfeld doesn't work. I think it would look bad if you go to the court early on an extraordinary writ and they decline to take it, which I think they would. What do you say to people like Mark who want you to throw everything at the wall, including the Extraordinary Writs Act?
Look, Mark is great. You're right. I don't necessarily agree on everything that he says, but I love the fight and I love the ideas. There's a lot of things to think about there, right? It's not just this case. We won a case yesterday, but we have other cases going on with President Trump, and you have to be. I think you have to be strategic about when you run to the Supreme Court. And so there's a lot of factors, I think, beyond Manhattan that come into play with whether we use the writ. But listen, there is nothing not on the table, and I mean that, and I say that to the president when we talk about strategy, and he of course knows Mark and knows and watches and hears a lot of options, and I think that if you're going the extraordinary route, by definition you're doing something extraordinary, so the chances of success are diminished. But we'll see what happens. I still have faith in the system. It's taken a lot out of me this year, but I'm hoping that Judge Merchan does the right thing, and if he doesn't, that there's a quick relief in the appellate system, and that we don't have to race to the 9 justices to get relief. But listen, Mark's right. This is a once in a lifetime prosecution. And it needs to be stopped, and so if that's the only option to stop it, I think we'll try it.
Well, the cleanest way is if Judge Merchan himself takes the off-ramp that the Supreme Court gave him in the 2 cases of Trump versus the United States and Erlanger. What's coming up today about J.D. Vance, President Trump's triumphant entry into the convention of Republicans in Milwaukee. But I continue my conversation with Todd Blanche, lead lawyer for the former president in Manhattan and in New York. Yesterday, big win for Team Trump in New York. Judge Kennan dismissing everything that Jack Smith brought as an indictment, because Jack Smith was improperly before the court. He is not an inferior officer. He has not been confirmed by the United States Senate. This was a surprise and a shock to people like my friend Ruth Marcus at the Washington Post. But I've been arguing this forever. I teach con law at Todd Blanche, and this is obvious to me that unlike David Weiss, who's a U.S. attorney, and unlike Robert Hur, who's a U.S. attorney, and otherwise appointed appropriately and confirmed by the Senate, Jack Smith has no business in front of anyone bringing anything, arguing that he's independent of Merrick Garland. How surprised were you, and how satisfied are you with Judge Cannon's ruling yesterday?
Yesterday was a phenomenal day for the rule of law, in my view, for President Trump, for his family, for Walt Nauta, for Carlos, the other defendants that were charged. Surprise is definitely the wrong word. Judge Cannon, she's done every step of the way. She's been careful. She's listened to everybody. She's criticized soundly in the media because she takes her time and is thoughtful, which is extremely not only unfair, but absurd, frankly. And you're right. The argument here is so basic that it almost belies common sense when you think about the other result, which is that a private citizen, in this case Jack Smith, is given the power to take away somebody's liberty, the power to sign indictments, and he's not been nominated by the president. He has not been confirmed by the Senate. And we have a United States Constitution, and the United States Constitution says you cannot do that. And so while it seems almost obvious that there's other courts that have gone the other way, if you read her 93-page opinion, it is a gem. I think it's really, really thoughtful. It makes sense. It follows the law. And yesterday was just it was a great day for all kinds of reasons, obviously, with the vice president being announced and coming off of Saturday, which was a horrible day. But I got to call President Trump yesterday morning and deliver the news, and it's amazing. But we can talk about it all you want. It's right. Her decision is right.
Oh, it's correct. I want to play for you. Last night, Joe Biden was asked by Lester Holt about the decision by Judge Cannon, and he responded this way, cut number 25.
Some other developing news today, if I can. Judge Cannon dismissed the documents case, as you may have heard, in Mar-a-Lago. Can I first get your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised. It comes from the immunity decision the Supreme Court ruled on, and Clarence Thomas, in his dissent, said that independent prosecutors appointed by the Attorney General aren't legit. That's the basis on which this judge moved to dismiss. And but I had an independent prosecutor look at me. They spent months on my going through, and I was totally cooperative. In and out of my house, I don't know, the last time in, there were like 10, 12 agents in my house for 9 hours unaccompanied, going through every single thing I had. That's appropriate. And they looked at me and concluded I didn't do a damn thing wrong. But my generic point is that it's, the basis upon which the case was thrown out, I find specious, because I don't agree with Clarence Thomas' dissent.
Mr. Blanche, that is so preposterous. I will note for the audience, Clarence Thomas concurred. He did not dissent. I will also note for the audience that Robert Hur, the special counsel, and by the way, an appropriately appointed special counsel, did not bring charges against President Biden because he was, quote, a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. We have a minute to the break. What do you think?
I mean, yes, I agree with you. Moreover, President Trump cooperated as well. And he was not being, no matter what anybody says, he was not being difficult or obstructive. And by the way, if anybody thinks that Judge Cannon wrote a 93-page opinion because of what Justice Thomas said in his concurrence, they haven't read it. So certainly Justice Thomas' concurrence is consistent with her ruling, but she ruled that way because it's consistent with the law.
I wrote for the Washington Post that Mr. Marchand, Judge Marchand, should never have taken this case given the appearance of impropriety, given his donations. Will that be part of your appeal in the New York appeals system and then eventually the federal appeals system if you fail, if he does not do the Provident thing and dismiss this case in light of Trump versus the United States and Erlanger versus the United States?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We made two separate motions asking Judge Mersan to recuse himself. I've practiced law for over 20 years. I was a federal prosecutor for almost a decade, a supervisor for 4 years. I've been a defense attorney for 10 years. And, it's not just about whether there's an actual conflict, which I believe there is an actual conflict, but it's also the appearance. And you have a courthouse full of judges. It's not as if he's the only judge. And I very much feel very strongly and passionately about the motions that we filed about his conflict, and he didn't agree with us. And of course, if there needs to be an appeal, which hopefully there never will be, that's going to be one of the most significant complaints that we have to the First Department and federal court if it gets to that.
I think it's a more that is Todd Blanche. That is the former, he's the new Deputy Attorney General. And for those who don't know, I'm a Justice Department alum. The AG, the Deputy AG, the Associate AG, and then a bunch of Assistant Attorney Generals, most important of which is the Solicitor General in the Office of Legal Counsel. But the DAG runs the building. And if for any reason Matt Gaetz does not make confirmation, I wouldn't be surprised if they simply swap out Deputy Attorney General. He will be confirmed. He will be confirmed. He's a great lawyer, and he knows justice, and he's Southern in New York, and that is with Doug Burgum and Doug Collins and Sergio Gore. What a great day to wake up to.
I'm here to tell you that we've got some internet problems at our production studio in California. The provider has gone down, not our studio, but I am still pleased to welcome the one and only Ben Domenech, editor-at-large at The Spectator, Fox News contributor extraordinaire, my weekly news and review guy. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. It's been a busy week in Washington, to say the least. I was on Capitol Hill, actually, which is a rarity for me, taking some friends around just the other day on Wednesday on a trip from Australia to show them the Capitol building for the first time. And obviously, the day began with, there's a rules battle and they're going to pick a new leader. And then we had this rolling out of Trump picks that was pretty jarring, I would say, in terms of how it escalated quickly. but I am. It was
you can
a
hear
very interesting week.
I think Doug Burgum at Interior is the equal of Marco Rubio at State, Michael Waltz at National Security Council, because I know Interior better than any agency that I've dealt with. I'm retired from the practice of law. I don't want a job. I don't have to take care of anyone's feelings. What I thought I would do with you, get a letter grade for every nominee.
Okay, can I just interject something real quick? And you may not realize this, but my father worked at Interior under both George W. Bush and under Donald Trump.
I had remembered. I knew that, but I'd forgotten it. So know Interior. It's got 70,000 employees. Got Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Education, Land Management, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, Bureau of Trust Fund. It has the National Park Service, the Office of Surface Mining, the key one, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, my nemesis, and the U.S. Geological Survey. What did your dad do?
So he was the deputy undersecretary and then deputy secretary in charge of the islands and territories out in mostly the Pacific, of course, USVI in addition to that, and but spent a lot of time on issues related to Guam and some of those other areas, and so my Interior is my favorite department as well, and one that I think is just fascinating in terms of the issues that it deals with, and I think Burgum is a phenomenal pick, A+. It's
and all you need is AI to run the USFWS right out of business. They can decide the critical habitat down. AI can do all that. And I'm not going to get off on my hobby horse, but let's start with we gave him Burgum an A+, and I agree. He'll fly through. How about Marco Rubio at State?
Oh, I think he's great. I think he's phenomenal, and I will just say I think it's an A+ move, but it's also I think it's a good move for him career-wise. I think it's something where he's going to have authority in an area where he knows more than I think almost anybody in the country what that department needs in order to function better. And look, Mike Pompeo was a great Secretary of State, but he also had to deal with a ton of things that had to distract him from, I think, the kind of internal reform that place needs. I think Marco will be able to do that and achieve it under this second administration in a way that was really a task that was going to be hard for anybody to go into that job.
The knock-on effect, what very few people know, is that makes Senator Tom Cotton part of the Big Eight as chairman of the Senate Intel. And I just love that. I thought Marco was great at that. Senator Rubio was great at that. But I just love Senator Cotton being part of the game.
I'm glad that he's staying. Yeah, we need him there. Yeah.
All right, next, Pete Hegseth, defense.
Look, I've known Pete for 13 years, and I think that he's going to be a very good SecDef. I think that the simple fact is that people are talking about this in terms of the experience level or things like that. And what I think that Pete brings is the perspective of someone who's served recently and has a lot of the frustrations that can be channeled into, I think, good leadership. I mean, it's one of these things where you have to make a choice about the kind of person you're going to have in that job. I think he's going to be a very effective communicator, and I think that he needs to be paired with a strong deputy who can really smack some heads around in terms of the inside the building kind of bureaucracy that needs to be done. So, I mean, I'd give it an A. I think it's a B+A move, and something that I think is out of it's out of left field for some people in Washington who are used to the traditional approach. But I think that we were going to always get some roll of the dice picks from Donald Trump, and Pete is clearly going to be somebody I think who has a lot of tasks in front of him.
No, I don't know him well. I've interviewed him about his book, The War on Warriors. I've talked to him a few times. I helped him when he briefly ran for Senate. I know he's a Christian man, and I know they're attacking him online from the left as being a Christian nationalist, which is laughable. But you know him well, Ben. What about that?
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely laughable. And the other thing is, there's just no basis for it at all. By the way, this is one of those things where you'll see threads about Pete where people are making claims about him, and then you look at the interview or you read the thing that he actually said, and it's eminently reasonable and justified. And it's one of these things that is just they have to lie about him, I think, because they don't have anything that is really going to be a real sort of flight against him in terms of this role. They view him as somebody that is not coming up through the traditional kind of defense consultancy kind of approach to things. But I think he's going to be very good at what Donald Trump wants him to do.
And I think he solves the recruitment crisis in about a week. How about Michael Waltz? No, full disclosure, my son worked for Mike Waltz. How about Michael Waltz at NSA? I think he's fabulous. A+. What do you think?
A+. And I also think this. I think Mike Waltz is exactly the kind of guy we need to deal with the problems that we have that relate to Mexico and the southern border. The fact that we need to change our relationship and that we can no longer trust the Mexican government in any way, shape, or form to do the kind of things that they've done in the past or committed to do in the past. I think Mike Waltz is going to be able to address that holistically from day one. He's going to be the hammer, I think, against that whole aspect of things. And look, when you take a step back from this admin, what do they look like? They look like they're tough on Iran. They look like they're tough on China. They look like they're tough on Mexico. This is something that I think is going to be a dramatic policy change, and he's key to that.
I will note breaking news this morning. Iran's nuclear site at Parshin was hit by Israel in the strike, and I'm glad about that. I just want to bring people up. We are aware of the news. So since we talk about Waltz, he's an inside the building guy at the White House, gets the corner office front left where Kissinger was and our friend O'Brien. Let's talk about Susie Wiles. I do not know Susie Wiles. I do not know Mr. McGinley, who's the White House counsel. Steve Miller is a hardliner on the border, but so am I. I'm a border hawk and a regularization dove. What do you make of the White House picks, including Wiles, McGinley, and Miller? I don't know the other one.
So I do not. I'll share. I also do not know Susie. I've met her and had conversations with her, but just don't know her that well. I do know Stephen, and Stephen and I actually, believe it or not, have overlapped in terms of we have kids who are basically the same age, and so we've overlapped at some various events and that kind of thing over the years. And I knew him a little bit when he was on Capitol Hill, and I've gotten to know him and his wife better over the past couple of years. He's a harder line guy than I am when it comes to the immigration issue, but I will just say this. I think he's been proven right time and again about how bad
and he's
things
very
are getting.
smart.
He's very sharp. And I think that, it's very logical to put him in that position because it makes sense. And it, again, sending the message that this is a top priority for the president. So, I mean, in terms of a cabinet and a group of people in the staff on the White House that looks like and reflects the priorities of the president, it's really, I mean, I think he's done a very good job of it, as you might suspect.
Well, we'll get
sure.
to that.
We'll get to it.
Let me stay on the national security case.
I'll just say this. If I were a member of the United States Senate, I would happily vote for all but one member of the
and we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Cabinet.
Let's go to Ratcliffe
and
at
be
CIA.
So, yeah.
I think this matters so much. I know the director. He was director of national intelligence a little bit. Spent a couple of days with him last year, and I'll tell you one. He's the smoothest swing I've ever seen of a non-professional golfer. Number two, he is whip smart, former U.S. attorney, and I think a brilliant guy. What do you think?
I think he's phenomenal. I think that he's just the kind of person we need at a moment like this. And given the level and degree of the challenges that we face around the world today, you have to have someone who is that serious and that smart in that job. And I think he's going to do a great one.
And quickly before the break, Elise Stefanik, cabinet member, UN. I am over the moon about this. What do you think?
The only thing I'll say about it, and I say this, damning with praise, is I'm going to miss her on Capitol Hill. It's something sort of thing where it's just like, it's a great choice, but it's just like I felt like she could be, potentially someone who in the future is speaker. Maybe she will be, in that role or on that path again, after her tenure there. But I think she'll be a great advocate for the United States.
Okay, I'm gonna stick with Ben. So let's start with the incomplete. I don't know anything about Kristi Noem. I don't know anything about Tulsi Gabbard. I don't know anything about RFK. I trust the Senate to do their job. Do you have any opinions on those three?
So let me run through them real quick. I think Kristi Noem is a talented person. The only question I have is whether she's in the right job, because it's one of these things where, the DHS job has a lot of tasks that are going to be pretty hard. But I do think that one of the things that the president wanted to do was have a dramatic shift away from Alejandro Mayorkas, and certainly you get that with Kristi Noem. I've known Tulsi for years. She's a close personal friend, and to be honest, Hugh, I don't know if you know this or not, she's actually godmother to our daughter.
I did not. I really don't have an opinion because I don't know anything.
Well, I'll just say this. My wife, when she did not know her, was somewhat skeptical about her, and then got to know her, and they're now very close friends. And it's one of these things where, I will just simply say this: she's an American patriot, and whatever you hear about her, she's said some things over the years that I think have been depicted as being more isolationist or peacenik or what have you than perhaps people are comfortable with. But I think that in that job, I think it's very good, and I think it keeps her close to the White House and to the president. And I think that she'll be good in that role. Frankly, I'm glad that she ended up in something like that. And when it comes to RFK, I don't like this positioning. I really would have liked to see RFK actually. To be honest, I was kind of hoping he would end up at EPA or something along those lines. I think his environmental policy is not as inconsistent with some of the different strains of science that he's gone after. I have heard Peter Thiel's case for him, which if you haven't heard it, I think is worth hearing because it's a smart case, and it basically says that we need to open up and question a lot of things that have been accepted in terms of governmental approach to sciences over the years. But that's going to be a very tough task. And HHS is not the job. I mean, I worked for Tommy Thompson at the HHS, and it's not necessarily the job people think it is. It's a lot more about managing systems like Medicaid and that kind of thing. And I'm not sure that RFK is going to enjoy that aspect of it.
And it's up to the Senate. Now, I want to talk about Gates quickly. I do not traffic in rumors. I haven't seen the FBI stuff. I don't know the DOJ stuff. I am Kevin McCarthy's friend of 35 years. So I do not like Matt Gaetz because of what he did to Kevin McCarthy. And I trust the Senate will do its job. I read your stuff. You're not a fan either.
Did that come through?
Yeah.
I apologize if I was unsubtle. No, look, this is the simple truth. Matt Gaetz has no business being the Attorney General of the United States. He just does not. Okay, he can be a member of Congress. People can send him to vote for them and be an avatar for their views. That's fine. But he has no business in that job. And look, I don't know whether he actually violated the law in terms of the letter of the law, in terms of his, transporting a minor and that kind of thing that he was accused of.
Yeah, I don't do any of that because I'm just mad at him for McCarthy and
exactly. Well, and then I'm just reading the same reports you are, and I've read the same coverage of it, and I know that his buddy from that did go to jail over these some of these allegations. But what I will say is simply this: I do not believe he is qualified. I do not believe he is a good AG, and I will tell you, Hugh, I know for a fact that there was a very strong effort to get someone else into that job who was having doubts about whether they should accept it or not, all the way up until the point where they had that fight with Matt Gaetz, where he was chosen and named. And that's something that I think is an indication of how much that things came down to the wire with that choice. And I think it's going to be a regrettable choice, and one that ultimately I do not believe will pass muster in the Senate.
I do not believe it'll get through the Senate. But I trust the Senate. We're coming back on air. Stand by. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. I am finishing my rundown of appointees with Ben Domenech, and we've got three left, Ben. Mr. Homan at the Border Czar job. I don't know him, but I like him.
There's a lot to like there, Hugh. I mean, he's tasked, obviously, with the north of the border stuff mostly, but he understands the border, and I think that in terms of having someone who's worked for both Republicans and Democrats, who's rock solid in terms of experience on the issue, a great advocate for a strong perspective on enforcing the law. I don't think you can do anything better. He is a strong A pick, and again, it's one of these things where this is about sending a message about what the president prioritizes. He's taking all of these picks seriously when it comes to American security, and Tom Homan is key to
that. Todd Blanche, Deputy Attorney General. I've only interviewed him once. He's a product of the Southern District of New York, where he was a division head. He won in Florida. He's winning in New York. He is tough as nails, and he will actually run the Department of Justice. I bet you they elevate him to be the AG if Matt Gaetz does not get.
I concur. I concur with that assessment. In fact, I was going to say that the simple fact that I think he is likelier to end up as the Attorney General. I think given the way that this is likely to play out. And look, I do not know him personally, but I've seen his interviews and that kind of thing, and he seems to me to be a very tough character. And I think he's, again, the entire DOJ needs to be cleared out. I mean, it needs to be cleaned up, and we can't have the kind of rogue functions that they've had in the past. And I hope that he's the right man for the job. I don't know him well enough to be able to really grade it, but I think that he.
I'm grading it on Andy McCarthy's basis, who gave an A, worked with the Southern District of New York.
Yes, and I trust Andy's judgment generally, and I think that in this case, of course, he knows more than me and knows more about what needs to be done.
Now, veterans matters to me because I've got veterans in my family. You've got veterans in your family. Doug Collins is a very smart guy. I knew him at Judiciary when he was ranking member. Do you know him?
I do. I mean, in the sense that I've interviewed him a couple of times. I think he's very solid, and it's going to be something that I think this is an issue that frankly is underappreciated in terms of the importance of it. There's so many of American veterans across the country who are dealing with challenges that really need to be faced and dealt with seriously. And the fact is that they've had to deal with wait times, deal with delays, deal with the kind of things that they shouldn't have to deal with. And I think that he'll go a long way toward correct.
And then finally, we don't have a Treasury, Commerce, or OMB person yet. I don't care much about Treasury.
Can I put a name out there because I need to say it. Russ Vogt. There is no reason that he should not go back to OMB. He should go back to OMB.
Other than he's got a promise to fund defense, Ben.
Well, let's work on Russ on that. We can have dinner with him and work on him. But just trust me, I think that this is a situation where you need someone in that job who has gone through the experience before. And I know that
you need someone on that wall. You want someone on that wall along with Ira. And I know Russ. Russ worked for John Campbell, and he's a good guy. He just has to wake up. defense needs like doubling.
Well,
what about Commerce and Treasury?
Commerce and Treasury. I mean, I'm a little surprised that we haven't had. I mean, there've been names obviously that have been floating out there, for both of those jobs for quite a while. I really don't know why we haven't got somebody yet.
People are fighting for it. They're fighting for it.
Yeah, they're fighting for it. I think that actually, and I think the former and future president enjoys that. It's an aspect of the job he likes, to see people clamoring to try to get those jobs. He has numerous good options. I don't particularly have a favorite candidate for either one, but I do think that there's a lot of folks who are out there who want it, who are certainly qualified.
And I would overall grade. I'm giving him an A. I know we've got one problem and we've got some question marks, but I'm giving him an A. And I think it's been rapid.
I share that view, and I really do. I think that I think there's literally only one person on this that I would not vote to approve. And I think that this is if you end up with a cabinet where there's only one major problem, that is very obvious, and it's one that, frankly, I think a lot of United States senators are already talking internally. They've talked to me. I've had, as you might expect, when you write something as vociferously opposed to a nominee as I did yesterday in my newsletter, Transom, the outreach from Capitol Hill is pretty quick, and I think that they're going to take care of that problem.
Production Studios Internet is back up in California. Thank you, whoever turned it off. It's not us. Byron York of the Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor, joins me. Good morning, Byron. I just finished a rundown with Ben Domenech of all the appointees giving letter grades. I want to do the same with you, but at a forced march. Marco Rubio.
I get a letter grade?
Yeah.
Okay, that's an A.
Pete Hegseth.
A B.
Doug Burgum at Interior, and if you say other than A+, I'm going to flush you down the toilet because he's the greatest thing. I hate the Department of Interior. I litigated with them until I retired. They need top to bottom reform. What do you think?
Well, in that case, I think I should say A+.
There you go. So Mike Waltz, and I always disclose, my son works for him. What do you think?
I think that's an A for that job.
Susie Wiles, Chief of Staff.
So far, so good. I give her an A as well.
I do not know Mr. McGinley. Do you?
No.
Okay,
no.
So we're incomplete. John Ratcliffe, CIA.
I think it's another A, especially since he served as ODNI before.
Right. Lee Zeldin, EPA.
I'll give that an A.
I do too. Elise Stefanik.
I'll give that an A as well.
The Ben Domenech said he wants to give her an A+, but he'll miss her in the House. But the UN needs someone like Elise Stefanik. Mr. Homan, who I have no opinion of, but Ben gave an A to, as borders are.
Oh, I like Tom Homan. I hope he gets to do what he plans to do, so I give him an A.
I gave an A+ to Todd Blanche. I don't know him. I've interviewed him at length. Southern District of New York, Andy McCarthy says, really smart, good lawyer. As the Deputy Attorney General, he runs the building and he runs everything. I think he'll end up being Attorney General. What do you think?
I agree with that, and I'll give him an
A. Doug Collins at the Veterans Administration. I know him a little bit. I gave him an A. Ben gave him an A. What do you think?
Yeah, same thing.
Kristi Noem, I gave an incomplete. I don't know her, and I know DHS is a nightmare. What do you think, Byron?
That could be a difficult task, but on the other hand, she's been a member of Congress. She's been the governor of South Dakota, and so I think that she's pretty well qualified for this.
I have no opinions on Tulsi Gabbard and RFK. I'm waiting for the hearings, but Ben Domenech reported he knows Tulsi very well and gave her an A. And I just don't know. So many people are having heart attacks. I just don't know. What do you think?
Well, I do not know her, and I'm a little troubled by this one, and I certainly would not give her an A, but I'm not sure exactly what grade it would be.
RFK I gave an incomplete to because, HHS can't be managed by man nor beast.
Well, this is a situation where people are saying, boy, if he concentrates on nutrition and food additives and all of that stuff, it could be really great. But hopefully he won't go into vaccines. I have no idea what he will do in this job. So he could do an A job, and he could really do a D job as well. I can't.
I trust the Senate. It's a great institution. Let's move to my least favorite, Matt Gaetz, and it's not because of the rumors and the innuendo. I don't believe any of that stuff because that happens all the time in D.C. My friend is Kevin McCarthy of 35 years, so I do not like Matt Gaetz because Kevin McCarthy built the machine, he built the House majority, and Matt Gaetz blew it up. That's why I don't like Matt Gaetz. What do you think?
I said on Fox on special report that the day it was made, it was just a terrible choice. I think it's just a terrible choice for Attorney General.
I don't think he'll make it to hearings, do you?
I'm not clear. We're seeing conflicting reports about this, but as far as I was thinking, look, I don't know what's in the ethics report. It might be consequential. I don't know. But I do know that he was extremely aggressive in actions that nearly destroyed the Republican majority in the House. And I thought it was amazing that he wasn't expelled from the Republican Party.
That's what I thought. Now let me ask you this as well. If you're a Republican running in 2026, if you vote for Matt Gaetz, it will be a campaign ad, and if you vote against him, it'll be a primary ad. So just in pure political terms, what do those 20 Republican senators do?
Well, we have. I know Murkowski has come out and said, first of all, Gaetz would have to lose 4 Republicans in the full Senate to not get confirmed. Murkowski said she won't vote for him. I think Collins wouldn't vote for him. You have to remember Bill Cassidy is one of the, other than those two, he's the only other Republican senator still in the House who voted to convict Trump in the second impeachment. So it looks like he's probably not looking for favors from Trump. So my guess is that he would be a no. So I think you could.
And Markwayne Mullins is on record when he was a member of the House with some harsh stuff.
Exactly. Markwayne Mullins was very, very critical of him. So
that's 4.
It's going to be hard to. Well, that's 4 right now. That kills it right there with unified Democratic opposition, which there will be.
But if there's a
I don't know why Democrats don't like him. He worked with Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries to bring down the Republican Speaker of the House. 208 Democrats plus Matt Gaetz thwarted the will of 210 Republicans. So
I will never get over destroying Kevin McCarthy, the most gifted political operator of my lifetime, who all he wanted to do was run the House for the benefit of the Republican majority. Mike Johnson's doing a good job. But I would guess a bunch of Republican senators don't put it in writing. They just get together with Donald Trump and say, withdraw.
I do think that would be the way. If this problem turns out to be a big problem for Trump, I think the way to do that's exactly it. Also, we haven't talked about the complexities of recess appointments, and there's been a lot of speculation in the press about this. But, the Senate and the House have to recess for 10 days. And first of all, it requires the buy-in of all the senators, and the senators that we just mentioned who are going to oppose this nomination are not going to support going into recess, so he could be sneaked into office.
And let me tell you another thing, Byron, which is a legal thing. Sorry? If you read Noel Canning, which is the 9-0 decision of the Supreme Court on why Barack Obama's recess appointments were no good at the National Labor Relations Board, and why the decisions rendered by the no good appointees at the National Labor Relations Board, which were recess appointees, they were all invalid. If Attorney General Gaetz is appointed by recess appointment, every decision he makes, every one, will be subject to being overturned by virtue of that decision. And you read the concurrence from Scalia, it says the recess appointment is only for intercession recess. I'm not sure I agree with that, but a pro forma, a make-up recess appointment, that's like asking for the constitutional Thelma and Louise drive.
I think you're absolutely right about that. So I think all of this talk about recess appointment is just talk in the press. So I don't think that's going to happen. So look, it's a very troubled nomination already, and a lot of speculation about why Trump did it. I don't know. Usually the simplest explanation is the best. He wants Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General.
Yeah.
But it could be, it faces a really tough road.
And he's using up political capital. I think, by the way, if Matt Gaetz is withdrawn, Todd Blanche steps up in the John Roberts move. If I recall correctly, the Chief Justice had been nominated as Associate Justice when Sandra Day O'Connor announced her retirement. And then Chief Justice Rehnquist died. And George W. Bush said, okay, John Roberts has gone through. He's the chief. And we're going to send you up Sam Alito. I think that's what happened. And I think that's what's going to happen here. We're going to just elevate Todd Blanche to be the AG and come up with a new DAG. Let me ask you about Treasury, Commerce, and OMB, the big three that are left. I have no opinions other than the OMB director has got to support a defense build-up and not argue about nickels and dimes. What do you think?
Well, a lot of the Republican base is extremely concerned about government spending. President Trump, needs to have somebody who wants to limit federal spending. And I understand what you're saying about a defense buildup. But there's got to be somebody who's pushing for more efficiency in government beyond the Department of Government Efficiency. And so that might be a place to do it.
I would say everywhere but defense, go for it. And Byron York, I'll be watching you on Fox News tonight. I'm going on vacation for a week. I hope you get one. After every election, every 4 years, I take a week off once the dust settles. And McCormick is one. What? But in less than a minute, Byron, because I got to do some work here. What in the world is Bob Casey doing?
I have no idea. Would you say the dust has settled? I don't think the dust has settled yet.
Well, I mean on the election. Trump won overwhelmingly.
In Pennsylvania, I don't know. I mean, Casey obviously has had a long career, family, and all of this stuff, and it just looks terrible. And you can only think that, well, maybe Mark Elias and Democrats are trying to establish precedents for counting all sorts of votes that legally can't be counted, so they could use it in the future or something. It makes no sense. This race is over. Obviously, McCormick has gone through the orientation. I mean, he's going to be the senator on January the 3rd, and that's just all there is to it.
The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. You know, how long has it been since the election? It's like the last time a team of mine won a championship. I've have a quick wear off of that feeling, and that's what the poem is about. I've visited Euphoria on weekends in the past. The thing about those visits is the feeling doesn't last. It's never been complete for me, this notion of elation. Reality sets in right in the midst of celebration. Someone's always pointing out majorities are slim. No one wants a vote that even close to sink or swim. We've got to be bipartisan to get around the cork. There isn't any budget if it doesn't have some pork. The left measures success by counting dollars that they've spent. The right wins an election, and with that, they seem content. Both of these opinions are the source of our bereavement. Most folks I know assess success by pointing to achievement. So in the context of this view, there's one thing that I'm asking. In the glow of victory, there'd better be no basking. Here is my request to Congress. Please don't say it's stunning. When you hit the ground, we all expect you to be running. That's a short visit to Euphoria by Tarzana Joe.
Well said, Joe. I am reminded of the late, great Ted Newland, the winningest water polo coach in history. I did a long series of interviews with Coach Newland when he was alive. And he used to say the day after he'd win an NCAA water polo championship, he'd tell the boys, doesn't mean anything. Let's go to work. And it's just, you get like one night and then you're back. Now, I don't know Euphoria because it's been since 2016 since one of my teams won the whole thing, the Cavaliers. But they are 13-0. I hope Cavaliers might deserve a poem in there, Joe.
Well, I one of my favorite poems or favorite client poems was a Cavalier success poem from the last time, and a Cleveland client had me autograph it and superimpose it over a picture of LeBron, and he has it framed up, and he sends me pictures of it on his wall whenever he's feeling
That
low.
was 8 years ago. Yeah, so maybe he's ready because they're 13-0 tonight. They beat the 76ers on Wednesday night, and they got a couple of they run into the Celtics next week. So I don't think I'd like 15 or up. Thank you, Joe. That will be posted at tarzanajoe.com. If you have a poetry request, you go to tarzanajoe.com, hit the I need a poem button, or simply write him an email. tarzanajoe@reagan.com, at tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.
It's early in the season. Thank you.